we have 2 more panels between you and lunch, so we're going to get you there as soon as we can. But these are amazing conversations that you don't want to miss. So let's get into it. Laura Kinder is here, and here's your mic.
Thank you.
Like many of our other speakers, you come from far, from New York, with Matt and Roland. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We've talked a lot about the tech stack and how AI is changing the way people are building products, but the organizational stack is also changing. And Laura is the president of Daversa. Daversa, everybody in this room knows who Daversa is, but and you can tell more. But Daversa has been an organization that I've known for almost 30 plus years, and they build companies. Every company that we've talked about today, all the big ones, small ones, they are behind all of those iconic companies in terms of building their management teams. So, Laura, tell us about how company building has changed in the age of AI.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's been amazing just to see so many faces. I finally got to meet OC in person after I have stalked her a number of years and see some old clients, and this is just such a great event. But yeah, maybe just like to give you some context, you know, I've been with the firm for 2 decades. We do somewhere between 900 and 1,200 searches a year as a firm, and that is across the entire ecosystem of tech companies, with the majority really being between that series like B and C, although we're seeing a lot of A's with these massive fundraising rounds that we're seeing. And then we're also seeing more public company work, as a lot of companies are trying to figure out how are they pivoting and adapting in this next era of AI. So we see a lot, and in some ways I think just like a venture fund that we're a prediction market, like we're kind of the Poly market or the Kalshi of the industry and where things are going and where things are shifting. And to answer your question, I think hiring's changed dramatically. I think that the playbook that I knew for probably 18 years got completely erased. I think that we use this metaphor inside of the firm, which I will try to do a good job of explaining to all of you. But think about like the tech ecosystem like the ocean, right? So at the bottom you used to have the seed and the Series A's. They were the lobsters and the crabs, and then you kind of had your B's and your C's, and then you had the big public guys. And typically, from a talent perspective, people used to stay somewhat in their ecosystem, right? You might have been with a Google, and then you might have said, you know what, I want to go start a company. But you typically found people that were very much, they weren't always stage agnostic. They actually were very purposeful about when they come in and where they think that they are going to have an impact. What we've seen now is absolute chaos. And I think all of you are probably seeing that chaos in the sense that you have seeds being, these researchers getting over $1 billion in seed funding. You have, we talked about, the Cursor and Elon and, that company, and the way you have Cursor that was sucking up talent, and Anthropic and OpenAI. And so the ecosystem has just changed so dramatically, and candidates are no longer saying, I'm a VP of engineering that's really great at managing a team of 150 plus. They're saying, you know what, like, maybe I'll go be an IC at Anthropic, or maybe I'll go manage a very small team at OpenAI. And so the competition is like definitely the most intense I've ever seen in my entire career.
So let's pick up on that. You talked about, let's say, VP of engineering. The skill set that companies were asking you to look for, let's say 3-4 years ago, has that changed when somebody comes to you now to get help on hiring a CTO or a VP of engineering? What's the skill set now versus before?
Yeah, so I'd say in prior years, you were really looking at the team size, and every company was going to say, my engineering team is 25, we're going to go to 75, and there's this like headcount growth, and you were looking at more about, okay, you know, your Series B, what you need now is you need someone who's going to think more about like systems and processes and, you know, how to implement them, and now that's all wiped out. I no longer hear these massive headcount, you know, incremental increases. I don't hear companies talk about that. I hear about, we need someone with agency. We need someone who can be very technical. So I think in particular with, I spend a lot of my time in engineering and product. So that's kind of the lens of where I, you know, my conversation here. But they want engineering leaders to be far more technical. They want them to have a lot more. Obviously, everyone now wants someone who can have that AI fluency or has been through that transformation. The problem is that there's so many companies that are still in motion on that transformation. So yeah, it's organizations, I think, as we've all seen, they're much flatter. That hierarchy, that whole ladder of hierarchy has been, you know, ripped out, and now the teams are much more lean and agile than we've ever seen before.
So how do you suss for AI fluency when you're screening candidates? Are there different tests or different conversations you're having?
Yeah, you know, I kind of we've actually. I'm obviously not an engineer, but I will spend a lot of time with them about how are they thinking about AI and what have they done? How are they building within the organization? We've been building a lot of our, you know, own kind of coding our own AI and building a lot of it internally at the firm. And so, you know, I had about a dozen meetings this week in San Francisco with, you know, everyone from, you know, leaders at Databricks and other, you know, kind of a whole range of, you know, different companies that are just friends. And I've been asking them, like, what are you building and what are you doing? And so it's really more about the curiosity. Are they like doing this at home? Do they, you know, most of these engineers will have their own agents running and they'll tell you about the wrappers they're using and but then systematically, how are they implementing it and how are they enforcing it throughout the organization?
Do you see the organizational design itself changing? That is engineering and product management and design blurring? Are you seeing people asking you to hire a single executive for those three functions?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because you asked me this question in September, and I told you no, but you were right. It's, I'm seeing, so we were at an event, was it September? And I think you had said you were seeing a merge. At that point, or you were predicting a merge. I had just started seeing that, but the answer is yes. We're seeing engineering and product collapse. So we're seeing more combined CPTO or, you know, head of product and technology searches, especially as you're looking at these agentic workflows with engineering, and then, you know, but I do think we're seeing a lot more on the product side as well.
Is there a role that you have hired for, a title that you haven't seen before, first time?
Yeah, well, obviously we've been seeing a lot of like head of AI. So we brought in Daniel Danker, we placed at Walmart as their head of AI and transformation. He was a product leader at Instacart. So we're seeing that head of AI title with a number of like large, you know, could be public, could be, you know, growth stage companies that maybe have a little bit more of a legacy technology to them.
What does that mean? What does that head of AI role mean? How do you define
really thinking about how are they going into their systems, how are they redefining both their internal systems with AI, and then how are they also redefining their product, you know, their product offering out to customers with, you know, AI.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And does that role report into the CEO directly, or is it under engineering, or where does it sit?
I think a lot of them are reporting to the CEO because of the importance of it. Yeah, so we're seeing, I mean, certainly if you want a big executive in that's not always the case, but we're seeing that now really moving up into that executive function. The other roles that, I can't say I didn't see them before, but I think the volume and the clip in which we're seeing them now is like, it's you know, staggering. I think I did like one CIO search in 2007, and it was like, yeah, we didn't do those searches. It was like, those are the sleepy people that are like, you know, they're just implementing systems. There's really nothing exciting. But now that job, the past, I'd say 2 years, has been in a dramatic spike, where as every company is figuring out, okay, like, 20 different people are trying out 100 different tools, AI tools in the company. We need to have some organization around it. What are we custom building versus what are we, how are we, using Claude? How are we, building our own platforms? That has been a very high demand role. So if you're, I was with the CIO candidate the other day and I was joking around. I was like, how many phone calls have you been getting? It's like more than ever because no one knows and everyone's trying to figure it out. And I think that role is also shifting. I think that what that role is going to look like is very different. And then CISO and security has been another one that the first one I did was probably 2 years ago when we did the CISO search for OpenAI. And I think before that I hadn't really done a CISO search. And now we probably have done 25 of them in the past year. Just as every company is thinking about threat and AI and that aspect.
Yeah. When you do these searches, CISO, maybe not CISO, but let's say the head of AI or the CIO, are you looking at different skill sets now or different resumes than before?
Yeah, in the past it used to be so much more about like management and, the teams that they've built. We don't talk about that anymore. We talk about AI fluency, adaptability, technical depth, curiosity there. And it is so rare that I have a client come back to me and say, that person's unfortunately managed 200 people too little. It's really much more about that, that agency and that, technical depth. And so that's really changed.
What about compensation? Secondary, we talked about that earlier. People have a lot more liquidity now before the IPO. How are things changing in terms of compensation?
Compensation's gotten out of control. And I think what's happening, there's a multitude of factors, which is, in Q1, I don't remember the number, but we had, more money than ever in the history that's flown into venture, right? So what happens is, more companies, more funding. We're at the part of the food chain that, we when companies are getting funded, they're growing, they're hiring, we get called. But because of the competition in the market, and even things like, for those of you out there that are entrepreneurs of a company, maybe a Series A, Series B company, you might think like, oh, well, the fact that Meta is is trying to get this research scientist for, I don't know, $40 million a year, $50 million a year. That's actually kind of light. That doesn't affect me, but it does, because what happens is that it's then that person's direct report gets called. Then that person's direct reports get called. And there's this entire feeding frenzy. And what happens is it's pulling everything up. And so I think that the days of I'm a Series B company and I'm going to pay this person, $225,000, which I feel like that's been the compensation for literally the 20 years that I've been doing this, plus 1% equity. You're not going to get someone great for that. So the comp, especially since January of this year, it has really increased with the demand. So there's just more activity in the water. I also think that a lot of founders are still, they haven't, building the reflexes on, we saw the market do a pretty steep downturn in 21 into 22. Compensations kind of fell, we saw a lot of layoffs. I think there still is a little bit of hangover from that with some founders. And so I think, I spend a lot of time up front with companies saying, okay, whatever you are seeing in this Compensia report is not relevant anymore. Let me tell you what I've been seeing for the past 3 months. Even my data from January isn't even that much relevant anymore, given how fast these things are outpacing.
So what should founders of startups do? How do they compete for talent in this age?
Yeah, listen, you can't compete financially against a Anthropic who's gonna offer, someone, $1 million on a starting salary. You can't compete against Meta and all of those. But I think where you do compete is really talking about your vision and your story and your value proposition and why you are going to win in an incredibly compelling way, and out recruiting you're out recruiting that set. So knowing that compensation-wise, no, you can't compete with the Mag 7. You just can't. But what you can do is you can go to that person's house and you can sit in their living room. You can maybe give them a larger portion of equity than you think, maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone. You can really talk about, the competitive moat. I think candidates are also, they're really smart right now. And I think, because I think so many people got burned, with these massive valuations that happened in, 21 into 22 that then, collapsed, I think that candidates are now doing a lot more due diligence on the company than I've seen before. And so if there's a deal that they don't feel like has a real moat to it, defensibility, if it's a platform, they're like, well, Anthropic's gonna build that next week and release it. Look what we saw with Figma. It creates a lot of uncertainty with candidates. And so I think it's really important for you to make sure you're articulating your moat and your defensibility, why you're going to win, and then to just out-recruit that person from a relationship perspective. Even maybe betting on someone who's more of an up-and-comer. Focusing on the slope versus where they've been, I think is really critical to get that talent right now.
So let's flip that on its head. So that's the advice for founders. What's the advice for someone like Marco, who's graduating from Berkeley with a great degree in mechanical engineering? He's looking for jobs. How should Marco present himself to in a competitive
it's funny,
world like this?
I have a nephew who just graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, and
Marco, turn the camera
I
over.
built an entire playbook for him yesterday on what to do. I think you need to be creative and not just apply to a job board. And I think that you need to, first of all, talk about the tangible things, kind of what OC was talking about. Talk about the tangible things that you have built and you have done and the impact that you've had. And then I think that you need to not only send find the opportunity and maybe send your resume to the whatever black box you're sending it to, but then figure out now with AI, it's amazing the tools we have, who are 2 or 3 of the likely hiring managers? Figure out their email addresses, reach out to them, email the CEO. Be bold. And yeah, I get it. You're probably not, maybe you're not emailing Elon Musk, but I would commend you if you did.
Especially for mechanical engineering, definitely.
Yeah.
SpaceX is going public, my friend.
So I think that, and I think be creative with your research. Look at go figure out and track where is the money going in venture. I have a list of 200 companies I just gave my nephew, so I can give it to you. But thinking about defense tech is that funding is outpacing, right? You look at all of the energy, the compute, the manufacturing, the next gen, all of that, and then be creative and aggressively go after it and figure out how to get yourself into the room. I think is how you'll stand out. So. Can I get an intro?
Well, and you come here so you can meet Laura.
Yeah.
So that's what you do.
Yeah.
Last question for you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to ask from the other direction. What if you would be an extremely skillful and experienced 50-year-old? How would you then think about strategy and finding a job?
So the question's about... Yes, questions, just to repeat the questions, for mid-career executives entering the job market, how do you address that?
Yeah, I think I think it'd be a lot of, similar advice, but I think it's also going back to showing your AI fluency in areas too. I think, what you've built, what you've done there, and again, this is the world that I live in, so it may be a little bit, biased, but I think, I think organizations are feeling they're having massive rejection from their employees right now, and maybe not in your standard tech organization, but if you're looking at, other kind of non-tech organizations where there's a lot of rejection on that, or people are scared to try it. I think that, someone that kind of comes with that skill set, which is the new skill set that's going to define, the future, I think that's going to be massively valuable.
Last question for you. 10 years out.
Oh, I don't know.
Imagine. It's an imagination there.
Yes.
10 years out, will we have the functional organization that we have today with engineering, product, sales, legal, finance, or will there be something different?
I think that the roles in the leadership is going to be there. I think it's going to collapse. Meaning, I think engineering and product will be one. I think that, used to have a head of brand marketing and head of growth marketing. I don't think that's two roles anymore. You used to have finance and operations. I don't know. I think I think that you're still having, these very strategic leaders that, you can't take away the person, you can't take away the relationship side of it, but I think there's a lot that you can collapse and condense, where it's going to look more narrow, is my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura.
Absolutely.